Hello again, it's Jason Renaud with the Alternative Mobile Services Association, and this week's AMSA Talks is with Scarlet Neath of New York University Law School's Policing Project. Welcome, Scarlet.
Thanks, Jason. Happy to be here.
Great. You have produced a very interesting essay, which was published last week in the New York Times. It's called "A Revolution in Public Safety is Underway." You have a couple co-authors. Let's talk about that article. It'll be linked in the show notes below, so people can get at it. We'll have a little gift link so you don't walk through the paywall of the New York Times. Scarlett, what was tell us a little bit about this. Actually, let's start. Tell us a little bit about you and about your work at the Policing Project.
Sure. So I have been with the Policing Projects for about 6 months, and previous to that was doing similar work to advance alternatives to policing at another organization called the Center for Policing Equity. And here at the Policing Project have really been focusing on our Reimagining Public Safety initiative, which supports communities across the country who are rethinking their public safety models to include alternatives to police. Obviously, mental health crisis response would be a huge part of that. But I think what we focus on here at the Policing Project that maybe is a little bit unique is helping cities expand the kinds of calls that they're able to respond to with non-police responses. And that could even include online responses or just responses to things that aren't necessarily crises, but more routine issues like a noise violation or a neighbor dispute or even like a traffic crash investigation and report, things that do need some kind of a response, but don't need someone with a badge and a gun to attend to. So that is the work that we are focused on, and that was the basis of the New York Times op-ed recently.
And the Policing Project produces a lot of documents and reports on these various ideas, this large thought project you're involved in. But this time you decided to reach out to get a bigger circulation to the New York Times.
Yeah, that's right. I think with the 5-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, we were, like many, reflecting on what has happened in this field in the past 5 years and use that kind of what we call in media a news hook to start a conversation about this movement and about the work that we're doing. And I have to say, I wasn't sure that the New York Times would take it because it seems something that is, so familiar to me at this point. But I think a good reminder that this is new information to a lot of people across the country and they might have heard about, deploying social workers instead of police to certain mental health calls, but we've really just scratched the surface of public awareness of this movement. And that's a big thing we're looking to do in, say, the next 5 years, is see that narrative change and really help institute this as a commonly known fourth response system in this country, akin to fire, police, and EMS.
And there is a lot of cynicism to counterbalance about what's happened since 2020. We didn't defund the police, and a lot of people wanted the police to be defunded or dismantled in some sense, and that's really not what's happened. And as people have looked at this question more deeply, that really wasn't a strong solution.
Right. I mean, I think, unfortunately, how our news media often works is seeing issues in black and white, defund the police or support the police. And of course, as you and I and everyone in this field knows, it's more nuanced than that. And public safety needs a lot of different solutions and different resources to different kinds of responders. And I was really pleased to hear from a lot of people in my life who I shared the piece with who weren't as familiar with the work I do, that they found it to be optimistic and that they weren't aware of this kind of solution that's being worked on in many communities, and they thought it made complete sense to divert more low-level calls from police and see it as kind of a no-brainer. So that was encouraging to hear.
Yeah, we have to remember it took 30 years for 911 to really migrate as an idea and as a practice across the country. This is going to take a little time.
Exactly, and I think about that often too with the founding of EMS and the origins in the Freedom House ambulatory services and how that wasn't an overnight transformation by any means.
Yeah, fascinating story. We all heard last week at the conference at New York University Law School, hearing from Chief John Moon from Freedom House about the ambulance service there in Pittsburgh. Fascinating history. I encourage anyone who wants to know more about emergency medical services to look up that documentary. You can find it online. It's pretty easy to find.
Absolutely, and I was thrilled to see that story mentioned in the recent HBO show The Pit, because again, a lot of people in my life who are not familiar with it were told me that they had Googled it after they found it so interesting. And again, to the point of getting these stories and this work out to a broader audience, I think that's so important.
Yeah, an authentic American hero right in our midst.
Yes.
So before we dive into this essay, tell me about you have two co-authors.
I do, yes. Our executive director, Max Markham, and our co-founder, who's in New York, NYU law professor, Barry Friedman, are my co-authors. So it was nice to have them.
So tell me the mechanics. How do you go about writing together? Three people writing together about a subject you all know so well, you could all just bang, bang, bang. What makes it a collaborative project?
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. We have an amazing comms director who did the first draft in a way that is better than had any of us taken the first pass at it, because he's able to do that kind of lay audience writing. And I actually used to be in a role like that way back when at the Vera Institute and was drafting op-eds for people. So it's kind of a full circle moment to be on the byline this time. But then we all layered in our respective edits, but really there was very little disagreement or very light editing, because I think we all knew exactly what we wanted to say.
It's a talent to have that perspective in the academic world of writing for a lay person.
Exactly, yes. Max and Barry are two very talented writers who happen to be lawyers, which is not always the case.
Yeah, that's often an impediment to making clear writing. Well, but this is a very clear piece of writing and very brief and accessible to anyone, and really gives a good status report of what's going on around the country. Why don't you walk us through this and tell us the basic parts and pieces of it?
Sure. So we basically wrote it, as you say, for someone who has no idea what has been going on with this field. So started with the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, and as kind of a touch point to looking back on the past 5 years of police reform, but of course broaden that to really include these alternatives to police and broader public safety system reform, and described how there's been more than 130 such programs proliferating across the country. They've seen really good success in the outcomes that have been documented, and things like the study about the Denver STAR program, et cetera. And then we talked a little bit about our work in Minneapolis, the city, of course, where George Floyd was killed by police, to holistically reimagine their public safety system, which includes just taking stock of what exists, what call types are being dispatched to police that could perhaps be dispatched to either other systems that they already have in place, or alternate responders that are not currently in Minneapolis, but that we know exists across the country, for everything from traffic crash response to animal, barking dog complaints. So we try to paint that picture a little bit, and then spoke about how Minneapolis, based on our analyses, is now committing to diverting 20% of their calls from service from police to alternate responses by 2030. And we end on a call to action for other cities to do the same, which is introducing our new initiative called 12 Million Calls, where municipalities can make that similar kind of a pledge and join our community practice to really scale this work in a meaningful way that will reduce burdens on the police, improve public safety, improve efficiency, all the things we wanted to do, rather than tinkering at the edges, which I think will happen if we continue at a smaller scale.
Unpack that figure, the 12 million calls. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we started with the idea of, what if more cities did this 20% commitment? What kind of scale could we have nationally? And we did a little back of the envelope math about if the 100 biggest municipalities in the country followed suit and pledged to divert 20% of their calls, that would total 12 million calls diverted from 911, which would total 5% of the nation's 911 calls. So that's a really, I think, meaningful chunk of the pie there, 5%. And I think it's important to just begin cataloging this, even if we don't necessarily hit that goal. It's important to start talking about how many calls are being diverted and what we aim to aspire to. I used to be in the kind of broader mass incarceration, criminal justice reform space, and it's akin to the goal that was set a while back of the Cut 50 campaign, which was about shrinking our incarceration by 50%.
Let me back up and ask about your comment about diverting from 911.
Mm-hmm.
Most calls go to 911, but I think you meant diverting from forwarding those calls to police.
Yes, I'm sorry. Diverting 911 calls from police to alternate.
To some alternative. And these alternatives are pretty variety. There's a lot of variety here.
Absolutely, yeah. As I mentioned before, it could be, behavioral health crisis responders or animal control units or crash investigators. I think there's really important work being done right now about mediation and training mental health responders to resolve mediation-based complaints. And then there's also online reporting. We can use all kinds of technology to have folks report incidents online rather than talking to a human in real life.
And then getting some support, maybe in person, maybe not in person.
Exactly.
As the situation warrants.
Yeah, exactly. So there's different kinds of thresholds, like for property theft or the like, that trigger online versus in person, and adjusting those can also have a really good impact on reducing.
Right. So this is an area where technology could be a huge assistance.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And thinking about that reduction in transition, is there a cost saving there? Do we understand anything about that yet?
Yeah, I think we have the beginnings of understanding that this will be a cost benefit to cities, but much more work needs to be done to rigorously evaluate these changes. But as previously mentioned, the academic study on the Denver STAR program, I think, was so helpful and important because it quantified not only the impact of the actual calls diverted, but also calculated the future likely recidivism of individuals who would be whose behavior would be categorized as a criminal offense if they had not been diverted. So I think looking at cost benefit analysis holistically, looking at future criminal justice offenses diverted, all of those things is really important when talking about these systems.
Yeah, so when you send the wrong person to the call. They can't solve the problem. Say you're sending a police officer to someone who's in a psychiatric crisis.
Exactly.
You can't really solve it. The officer is frustrated, the family is frustrated, neighbors are frustrated, and then that call will be probably repeated as someone is sort of, we don't know what else to do, we'll call 911.
Exactly. And then it's, not surprising at all that there's research showing that police officers have higher rates of burnout when talking about substance use related overdose calls and the like compared to other first responders who are better equipped to actually meet the people's needs.
Yeah, one of my over-the-horizon concerns is that as mobile crisis alternative response expands, police officers will see their role really change to not be a mediator, to not have to be in these frustrating situations, but also to harden up, and they're more involved in active criminal operations.
Right.
It could really change policing too.
Right, which is a huge part of the puzzle that I think a lot of work needs to be done on that front to define what good policing looks like in the future, especially with certain call types being diverted away from them.
So are you happy with this article, or are you getting some good responses from the community, from friends or family?
We are, yes, all of the above. We've gotten some reach out from people we didn't know before who are interested in these issues, which is fantastic. And then from friends and family, I think the best compliment I got was from a former boss and mentor who does similar work, saying this will be so helpful to explain the work I do to my friends and family. It's captured it very clearly, and that means a lot to me.
That's great. That's great. So this has been a terrific advocacy tool, not only for Policing Project, but also for the idea in general.
Glad to hear it.
Is there any plans on something else to do with this, or is this all set?
Well, the op-ed is all set, but lots of plans forthcoming for the 12 Million Calls initiative that we're kind of debuting through it. So that's really just getting started. And if any jurisdictions watching are interested in learning more and signing up for a pledge to divert a certain number of your calls, please feel free to reach out to us at the Policing Project, and we're excited to get that ball rolling.
What sort of, what would you offer these cities calling in?
Yeah, great question. So we're building that out, but basically a community of practice and technical assistance support to do the kind of work that we're doing in Minneapolis and other cities of helping them identify low-hanging fruit of call types that are currently routed through police that do not need to be. I think what's helpful is that we can talk about what other cities already do this. So it's not like a scary road forward of a solution that is untested. So for example, in Minneapolis, we know that they deploy police officers to every EMS call currently, which is quite unusual. So we're helping them understand how other cities are able to not do that as a default practice and what their sort of policies and parameters look like.
Now, Minneapolis is kind of a medium-sized and pretty well-managed city. Are you interested in big cities, small cities, villages?
We're interested in all of the above. We're talking to smaller cities and to bigger cities, and I think it's really important to have all those kinds of communities represented in this work, because there's something that every community can do to scale this stuff.
That's great. That's great to hear. I often talk to really tiny towns. We have an interview with Roswell, New Mexico, a couple of months ago. And they're really struggling to figure out how to, they hear about Denver Star, they hear about Minneapolis, but they really don't understand how to scale, how to get some effective work in their city of 20,000.
Right. I think that's where, regional crisis response can come into play, sharing, kind of resource sharing across jurisdictional borders, but that's a huge part of the puzzle that I think hasn't been adequately explored. I agree.
And you're willing to to listen to their problems and help them sort out these, find some solutions.
Absolutely. And if we can't, then we know everyone else who's doing similar work, and happy to point them in a good direction of other TA providers and the like.
This is a magic moment where people doing this sort of work really know each other.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's different than other issues I've worked on. I think this field is very collaborative and very kind of has the same goal in mind and knows that there's tons of work to do, and we do it really well together.
The magic moment. Well, thank you, Scarlett. Thank you for writing this article with Max and Barry, and thanks for joining us on AMSA Talks today.
Of course, happy to.